I would like to reiterate what we said last week. Brazil condemns in the strongest possible terms the use or threat of use of all weapons of mass destruction, including biological and chemical weapons, anywhere, by anyone, under any circumstances. I thank you, Mr. President.
أشكر ممثل
I thank the
البرازيل على
representative of
بيانه
Brazil for his
وأعطي
statement
الكلمة
and give the
لممثلة
floor to the
كينيا.
representative of Kenya.
Thank you, Mr. President. We join others in expressing our deepest condolences to the mission of Ireland and the family of Ambassador Jim Kelly over his shocking demise. I thank Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, Undersecretary General and High Representative of Disarmament Affairs, for her briefing. Mr. President, it is regrettable that the armed conflict in Ukraine rages on at an intolerable cost to the people of Ukraine, and increasingly to the entire world, especially the global south, as prices of essential commodities rise sharply because of shortages and the impacts of sanctions. We are gravely concerned by the sustained targeting of civilians and objects indispensable to the survival of the civilian population, including residential homes, health facilities, shelters, as well as power and water infrastructure, in violation of international law and international humanitarian law. At this point, Mr. President, this Council should be focused on getting a cessation of the military campaign in Ukraine. We appeal to the concerned to do so immediately to allow humanitarian action and facilitate a much-needed dialogue towards a sustainable political solution. Any allegation of the development of biological weapons in contravention of the Convention on the Prohibition of the Development, Production, and Stockpiling of Biological Weapons must not be taken lightly. We call on all state parties to the Convention to make use of the established mechanisms so that any concern or suspicion of the presence of these extremely dangerous weapons can be verified. In situations of armed conflict, we must point out that such verifications demand a cessation of the conflict for it to be carried out. We urge state parties to the Convention on the Prohibition of the Development, Production, and Stockpiling of Biological Weapons to seize the opportunity of the 9th Review Conference later this year to strengthen the biological weapons regime. In closing, Mr. President, Kenya reaffirms its recognition of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. I thank you.
أشكر ممثلة
I thank
كينيا
the
على
representative
بيانها
of
وأعطي
Kenya for her
الكلمة
statement and give the
لممثلة
floor to the
النرويج.
representative of Norway.
Thank you, President. Let me also express our deepest condolences to the Irish mission for the very sad passing of our dear colleague, Jim Kelly. At the outset, thanks to the High Representative Nakamitsu for your briefing. We were called here today at the request of the Russian delegation to again discuss claims of a biological weapons program in Ukraine. Yet, we heard from the High Representative last week, and it was repeated today, and I quote, "The United Nations is not aware of any biological weapon programs in Ukraine." Russia has failed to offer any credible evidence for its claims, providing us instead with unsubstantiated information, allegation, and interpretations. We have trouble understanding the rationale behind the last-minute call to have further discussions today. We find it unacceptable that Russia continues to repeat its unsupported claims that Ukraine is preparing to use biological weapons. It is becoming quite clear that this is just another smokescreen tactic to draw attention away from Russia's role as aggressor in this illegal invasion of Ukraine. President, Norway remains a firm supporter of the Biological Weapons Convention, and we are determined, together with partners in the international community, to uphold a total ban against biological weapons. Norway condemns any use of such weapons. They cannot and must not be used under any circumstances. This would constitute a clear violation of international law. We deeply regret that Russia, by calling these meetings, seeks to undermine this council and its vital role to peace diplomacy. Exactly 8 years ago, we were shocked by the Russian illegal annexation of Crimea. And now, Russia is waging an unlawful war against another UN member state with devastating humanitarian consequences. The sole responsibility for the war falls on Russia. Russia must end it now. Thank you.
أشكر ممثلة
I thank the
النرويج على
representative of
بيانها
Norway for her
وأعطي
statement
الكلمة
and give the floor to
لممثل
the representative of Gabon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ma
Thank you,
délégation
Mr.
tient tout
President.
d'abord à
President,
présenter ses
We would like
condoléances
to begin
à
by
la
expressing
mission
our
d'Irlande.
condolences to the Irish mission.
Je remercie
I'd
Madame
like to thank
Nakamitsu
Ms.
pour son
Nakamitsu
exposé.
for her briefing.
L'absence de faits nouveaux depuis
In
notre
the
dernière réunion
absence
vendredi
of new
dernier
facts since our
sur
last
le même
meeting,
thème, permettez-moi
last
de
Friday on the
rappeler
same matter, allow
l'essentiel
me
de la
to
déclaration
recall
de mon
the
pays face aux
main
graves
tenets of the
accusations
statement of my
réciproques
country in
faisant
light
état
of
de
the
risques
grave
persistants
situation that
d'utilisation d'armes
is
chimiques dans
raising
la guerre en Ukraine.
the risk of the
Mon pays
incursion
appelle les
of
parties
chemical
à s'en
weapons in the
tenir au
crisis in
strict
Ukraine.
respect des
My
dispositions
country calls
pertinentes de la
for
Convention sur les
parties
armes
to
biologiques
abide by the
qui
provisions
interdit
of the
formellement
Biological Weapons
l'utilisation des
Convention,
armes
which
à
formally
large
prohibits
spectre,
the
ainsi que
use
leur mise
of
au point,
broad spectrum
leur
weapons as well
fabrication
as
et
their
leur stockage.
development, production, and
Mon
stockpiling.
pays, en tant qu'État
My
membre de la
country, as a
Convention des
member
Nations Unies sur
state to the
l'interdiction des
United
armes
Nations
biologiques,
Convention on
réaffirme son
the
opposition
prohibition
à
of
toute
biological
utilisation
weapons,
de toute
reaffirms
forme d'armes
its
biologiques
commitment to
et appelle les belligérants à s'abstenir de
eradicating the use of
recourir à
biological
de
weapons
telles
and
armes
calls on the
et à
belligerents
respecter
to
le droit
respect
international.
international law in this regard.
Le Gabon réitère son
Gabon
attachement au règlement
reiterates its
pacifique
commitment
des
to the
différends
peaceful
entre États membres des
settlements of
Nations Unies
disputes between
et
United
nous continuons d'appeler
Nations
les
member
parties
states,
à
and
la
we continue to
désescalade
call on
et à
parties to
s'investir dans les
de-escalation
négociations en
and to
cours en
invest in
toute
ongoing
bonne foi
negotiations in
afin de
good faith
mettre fin
in
à
order
cette
to bring an
guerre
end
dont les
to this
conséquences sont
war,
déjà
of
visibles
which the
hors du
consequences are
territoire
already
ukrainien.
visible
Je vous
beyond
remercie.
Ukrainian territory. Thank you.
أشكر ممثل الغابون على بيانه
I
وأعطي
thank the
الكلمة
representative
لممثل
of
الهند.
Gabon for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of India.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our deepest condolences to the family of Ambassador Jim Kelly and members of the Irish mission. I thank USG Nakamitsu for her briefing. We have carefully noted the points made by USG regarding biological activities relating to Ukraine. India attaches high importance to the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention as a key global and non-discriminatory disarmament convention prohibiting an entire category of weapons of mass destruction. It is important to ensure full and effective implementation of the BTWC in letter and spirit. We also believe that any matter relating to obligations under the convention should be addressed as per the provisions of the convention and through consultations and cooperation between the parties concerned. As outlined yesterday, India remains deeply concerned at the progressively deteriorating situation in Ukraine. We welcome the latest round of diplomatic talks between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. We believe that immediate cessation of hostilities and diligently pursuing the path of dialogue and diplomacy is the only way forward. It is important to undertake this engagement, keeping in mind the need to respect the principles of the UN Charter, international law, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of states. I thank you, Mr. President.
أشكر ممثل
I
الهند على
thank the
بيانه
representative of India for his
وأعطي
statement.
الكلمة
I give the
لممثل
floor
الصين.
to the representative of China.
谢谢主席先生。
Thank you, Mr. President.
主席先生，
Mr. President,
我代表中国代表
on
团
behalf
的
of
全体同事，
all the colleagues of the
对
Chinese
爱尔
mission,
兰副代表
I wish
金
to
凯利大使的不幸去
express
世，
our deep
表
sadness
示
at
深
the
切的哀
passing
悼。
of a DPR of Ireland,
也
Ambassador
向
Jim
他的
Kelly,
家人
and extend
嗯
our sincere
12名大
condolences
使
to his
和
family
爱尔兰的全
and
体
the
同
colleagues
事
of the
表
Irish
示诚挚
mission.
的慰问。中方已经就
China
乌
has
克兰问题
stated its
多次
position
on the Ukraine issue many times.
当前形势
Under
下
the，current
国
situation,
际社会
it
普
is the
遍希
shared
望尽快实
desire
现
of the
停火，
international community to
避免更
achieve
多
a
平民伤亡，
ceasefire as soon as
避免更大
possible
规模
to avoid
人
more
道危
civilian
机。
casualties and
这
prevent
也
a
是
massive
中方的
humanitarian
期待。
crisis, which is also what
当
China
双
is
方直
hoping
接
for.
谈判
Direct
是解决问
negotiations
题
between the
的
parties
根本
concerned
出路。
are the fundamental way to
俄
solve
罗
the
斯和乌
problem.
克兰
Russia
已
and
经举
Ukraine
行
have
了
held
4轮
4
谈判，
rounds of negotiations,
而且还在继续接触之中。
and also they are
能
staying
够保持谈
in
判，
touch with
就
each
有
other.
实现
With
停火
negotiations
的希望，
continuing, there is hope
就
for a
能开
ceasefire
辟
and a peaceful
和平
future.
的未来。中方将继
China
续
will
劝
continue
和
to
促谈，
facilitate
我们
dialogue
支
for
持联
peace.
合国
We
和各
support the
方
United
大
Nations
力
and
开
all
展
parties
斡旋努
in
力，
ramping up
也
mediation
希望各
efforts,
方
and hope
都
that
能
all
多做
parties
有
can
利
do
于
more
促
things
进和
that are
谈，
conducive
而
to
不是火
promoting
上
peace
浇油
talks
的事情。
rather than adding fuel to the fire.
乌克兰危机的背后
Behind the Ukraine
是
crisis
欧洲
is the
安全
issue
问
of
题。
European security.
希望美
It is
国、
our
欧
hope that
盟
the
和
United
北约
States, the European
能
Union,
从
and
俄
NATO
方坐
can
下
sit
来
down with
进行
Russia
深
for
入
in-depth
全面
and
的对话，
comprehensive dialogue,
本着安全
and
不可
explore
分割原
ways
则，
to put in place
探讨
a
构
balanced,
建平
effective,
衡
and sustainable
均
European
衡、有
security
效、可持
architecture
续的
based on the
欧洲
principle
安全
of
体制，
indivisible
实
security,
现欧洲
so as
的
to achieve
长治久
lasting
安。
peace and stability in Europe.
在大规模杀伤性武器和
China's
生物安全
position
问题上，
on weapons of mass
中方
destruction
的立
and
场
biological
是一
security
贯
is
的、
consistent
明确的。
and clear.
中方主张全
China
面
stands
禁
for
止
the
和彻底
complete
销毁生物
prohibition
武
and
器
thorough
和
destruction
化
of
学
all
武器在
weapons
内
of
的
mass
一切
destruction,
大规模
including
杀伤性武
biological
器，
and chemical weapons.
坚决反对
China
任何国
resolutely
家
opposes
在
the
任何
development,
情况下
possession,
研
or
发、
use of
拥有
biological and
或使
chemical
用生
weapons
物武
by
器
any
和
country
化学武
under
器，
any circumstances,
敦促尚
and
未
urges
销毁库
countries
存化
that
武器
haven't
国
done
家
so to
尽快
destroy
完成
their
销毁，
chemical weapons stockpiles as soon as
遵守
possible.
禁止生物武器公约
Complying
是
with the
所有缔约
Biological
国的
Weapons
义务。
Convention is the
我们
obligation
呼
of
吁
all
尽
state
早谈
parties.
判建立
We call for
禁止
early
生物武器
negotiations
公
on the
约核查机制，
establishment of a
这
BWC
将有
verification
助于
regime,
提升
which will help
全
improve
球
the
生物
global
安全水平。
biosecurity.
中国曾经
China was
是
once
生物
a
生
victim
化武器的
of
受害
chemical
者。
and biological weapons.
中方认为，
China believes that
任何生
any
物军事活
information
动的信息线
and
索
lead on
都
biological
应
military
引起国际
activities
社会的
should
高度
trigger
关切，
heightened concern and
和重视，
attention of the international
避免
community
造成
to
不可
avoid
挽回的危害。
irreparable harm.
对此，
In this
有
regard,
关方面应采取
relevant
负
parties
责任的
should
态
take
度。
a responsible approach.
俄方进一步公布
Russia
了
has
新发
further
现的
revealed
相关
the
文件，
newly discovered relevant documents.
相关当事方
The party
应当
concerned
对存在的
should
疑问
respond to questions
予以回应，做出
and
及
offer
时、全
timely
面的
and
澄清，
comprehensive
打
clarifications
消
to
国
remove the
际社会
doubts
的
of the
疑虑。
international community.
这不是
We
过
do
分
not
的要求，
consider it too much to
在
ask.
这个问题上
And on this
也不
issue,
应该
no
搞双重
double
标准。
standards should be applied.
谢谢你，主
Thank
席
you,
先生。
Mr. President.
أشكر ممثل الصين على
I
بيانه
thank the
وأعطي
representative of
الكلمة
China for his
لممثل
statement.
المكسيك.
I give the floor to the representative of
Muchas
Mexico.
gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Permítaseme, en
Allow
primer
me
lugar,
to
sumarme
begin by
a
joining those
nuestros colegas
colleagues
y
of
expresar
ours
nuestra
in
más sincera
expressing our
condolencia
most sincere
a la
condolences
delegación de
to
Irlanda
the
por
Irish
tan irreparable
delegation
pérdida.
for such an irreparable loss.
Agradecemos la presentación de
We're
la alta
grateful for
representante
the
Nakamitsu
briefing by
y
High
tomamos nota
Representative
de la
Nakamitsu,
información
and
que
we
nos ha
take note
compartido,
of the information that
especialmente
she has shared
de
with
su
us,
reconfirmación
particularly her
de que la ONU no
reconfirmation that
tiene
the
conocimiento de
UN has
programas
no
de armas
knowledge of
biológicas en
biological
Ucrania. Como
weapons
lo
programs in
mencionamos
Ukraine.
en una sesión
As
anterior,
we mentioned at
México
a previous
considera
meeting,
que la
Mexico
Convención
believes
para la
that the
Prohibición del
Convention on the
Desarrollo, la
Prohibition of the
Producción
Development,
y el
Production, and
Almacenamiento de armas
Stockpiling of
bacteriológicas y toxínicas
bacteriological and
es el
toxin
instrumento
weapons is the
fundamental del
fundamental
régimen
instrument of the
multilateral de
multilateral
desarme
disarmament
para atender
regime
estos temas.
to address these
La
matters.
Convención
The
cuenta con los
Convention
mecanismos para la
contains
solución de
mechanisms
controversias
for the
a través
resolution
de
of disputes
consultas y
through
cooperación,
consultations and
los cuales
cooperation.
deben ser usados
should
en
be
caso de
used
que cualquier
where
Estado
any
parte
state
así
party
lo considere.
deems it necessary.
Si hay tantas dudas
If there are so
o
many
nuevos
doubts
elementos
or new information
como se ha sugerido,
as has been
¿por qué no se
suggested,
procede entonces
why
en los términos de la
don't you
convención?
proceed along the terms of the
El
convention?
Consejo no puede ser rehén
The
de
council can't
señales
be held hostage
contradictorias.
to
Un día
contradictory
se plantea
signs.
un asunto,
One day, one
al
matter
día
is raised,
siguiente
the next
se
day,
pospone,
something's
al día
postponed, the
siguiente
next
se
day,
sustituye por otro.
it's substituted for something
México
else.
seguirá siempre
Mexico will
abierto al
continue
diálogo
to be open to
y a la
dialogue
negociación
and to
constructiva,
constructive negotiation.
pero
However,
para avanzar,
to
pues debe
move
haber
forward,
reciprocidad
there should be
en
reciprocity
este compromiso
on
efectivo
this
con el
effective
diálogo.
commitment to
Han
dialogue.
transcurrido menos de 24
Less than
horas
24
desde la
hours
última
have
reunión del
passed since
Consejo
the
sobre
last council
Ucrania
meeting on
y
Ukraine,
las necesidades
and the
humanitarias
humanitarian needs
continúan
continue
creciendo.
to grow.
Lo que es urgente
What is
es
urgent
el cese de
is
las
a
hostilidades
cessation of
para
hostilities
asegurar la
to
provisión
ensure
irrestricta
the
de la ayuda
unhindered
humanitaria
supply
a
of
quien la
humanitarian
necesite
aid to
sin
whomever might
restricciones
need it
ni
without restrictions
exclusiones.
or
Muchas
exclusions.
gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much, President.
أشكر ممثل المكسيك على
I thank the
بيانه.
representative of Mexico for his statement.
أدلي الآن ببيان بصفتي ممثل الإمارات
I
العربية
shall now make a
المتحدة.
statement in my capacity as the representative of the United
بداية
Arab
أعرب عن
Emirates.
تعازينا الصادقة
At
وخالص
the outset, we
مواساتنا
express
إلى
our
بعثة
deepest
إيرلندا
condolences
وطاقمها
to the mission of
على
Ireland
وفاة نائب المندوب الدائم
over the
الإيرلندي
passing
السيد جيم
of
كيلي،
DPR Mr. Jim Kelly.
ونعبر عن تعازينا
We
لأسرته.
express our condolences to his family.
وأشكر السيدة إيزومي ناكاميتسو
I
على
thank Ms.
إحاطتها.
Izumi Nakamitsu for her briefing.
إن استخدام الأسلحة
The use
البيولوجية
of
أو أي نوع من
biological
أنواع
weapons or
أسلحة
any
الدمار
type
الشامل
of
من
weapons of
قبل
mass
أي من
destruction
كان
by any
وتحت
party
أي ظرف من
under
الظروف
any circumstances
أمر لا يمكن تبريره بتاتا،
is
ويمثل
unjustified,
اعتداء
cannot
على
be
البشرية
justified.
جمعا.
It is an attack on
إن
humanity
استخدام
as a
هذه
whole.
الأسلحة
The use
المحظورة
of these prohibited
يتطلب
weapons
استجابة دولية
requires an international response
وعواقب وخيمة على مرتكبي هذه الأعمال غير المقبولة والتي تعد
those who are
انتهاكا
responsible for
صارخا
the use
للقانون
of
الدولي.
these weapons must be held accountable
إن
as
الحظر
they
المفروض
constitute a
على هذه
violation of
الأسلحة
international
بما في
law.
ذلك
The
بموجب
prohibition
اتفاقية
of these
الأسلحة
weapons,
البيولوجية
including
يمثل
through
أحد
the
أهم
Convention on the
الإنجازات
Prohibition of Biological
الهادفة
Weapons,
للمجتمع الدولي،
is one of the most important achievements of
وعليه
the international
فإن
community.
الحفاظ على الإجماع الذي بني
Thus,
عليه
maintaining
هذا
the
الحظر
consensus
يقع
based upon
في صميم
which this prohibition
مسؤوليتنا
was
في
established
صون السلم والأمن الدوليين.
is part of our
وختاما
responsibility to maintain
تكرر
international peace
دولة
and security.
الإمارات
In
دعوتها
conclusion,
إلى
UAE
استخدام كافة
renews
الوسائل
its call
الدبلوماسية
to use all
المتاحة لإيجاد
diplomatic
سبل
tools
ملموسة للتخفيف من معاناة المدنيين
to alleviate the
والتوصل
suffering
إلى
of
وقف للأعمال
civilians
العدائية،
and to stop
والذي من
hostilities.
شأنه أن يتيح مجالا
This would in
للتوصل إلى
turn
حل سلمي
allow for
لهذا الصراع
reaching a peaceful
وفقا
settlement
للقانون
of this
الدولي
conflict according to
والقانون
international
الإنساني
law
الدولي.
and international humanitarian
أستأنف
law.
مهامي كرئيس لمجلس
I resume my
المجلس.
function as President of the Council.
طلب ممثل الاتحاد
The
الروسي الكلمة
representative
للإدلاء
of the
ببيان
Russian
آخر.
Federation asked for the floor to
أعطي
make
له
an additional
الكلمة.
statement. I give him the floor.
Спасибо, господин председатель.
Thank you very much, President.
Пропаганда,
Propaganda,
дезинформация,
disinformation,
любительство, аматоризм.
amateurism,
Ни на чем не основанные
is-
домыслы,
unbased imagination,
операция под ложным флагом.
false flag operations.
Вот что мы сегодня слышим.
That's what we've heard today.
Некоторые выступления
Some
практически
statements
дословно
have
повторяли
practically,
выступления
literally
11 марта.
repeated their statements from the 11th of March.
Если вы
If
ничего не
you
услышали нового в нашем
haven't heard
выступлении
anything new in
сегодня,
our statement today,
значит, вы нас не
it's
слышали
because
или
you
не
weren't
слышали.
listening to us.
Мы представили
We
не домыслы
provided not
на
fiction,
основании теории заговоров, подчеркнутые в
we've
темной сети интернета,
not something found in the dark web,
а мы представили
but we
новые
provided
материалы
new material
и документы,
and documents
которые мы
which
распространили.
we disseminated.
Эти документы
These documents
имеют подписи,
have signatures.
эти
These
документы
documents
были подготовлены
prepared
на основании
on the basis
сотрудничества
of
Украины
cooperation between
и
the
Соединенных Штатов
Ukraine and the US
в биологической области.
in the biological field.
Если
And
вы
if
можете опровергнуть
you
то, что мы
can
предоставили,
verify
я
what
вас
we've provided,
прошу ознакомиться
then
с
I'd
этим.
ask
Я уверен,
you
что
to
те, кому необходимо,
but
с
I
этим
think that
ознакомятся.
anyone who needs to be able to find this.
Если вы можете это
If you want
опровергнуть,
to
опровергните.
do so, then do so.
Но не голословными
But
утверждениями в российской
don't
пропаганде,
make unfounded
а
accusations of
ответами на
Russian
поставленные вопросы,
propaganda, but reply to the
которые мы
questions that
задали.
we asked.
Вы же отказываетесь это
You're
делать.
refusing to do so
Просто потому, что вам сказать
simply
нечего.
because you've got nothing to say.
Вместо этого вы пытаетесь
Rather than this, you're
обвинить
trying
нас
to
в
accuse
намерении
us of
применить на
intention
Украине
to
биологическое и химическое оружие.
deploy biological and chemical weapons
Это
against
верх
Ukraine.
цинизма.
This is real cynicism, isn't it?
Мы уже
We've
предупреждали,
already
а
warned
то, что нам
about the fact
известно,
that we know,
предупреждали официально,
we
а то, что
officially
нам
warned that we
известно,
do know
и у нас есть
and we do
сведения
have
о завозе
information
украинскими
about
националистами,
Ukrainian nationalists
отравляющих химических
using
веществ в некоторые районы,
chemical agents
чтобы
in some
совершить
regions
провокации,
to carry
обвинить
out
в
a
этом Россию.
provocation and then accuse Russia of
Это и
having done
есть
it.
то, что называется операцией под ложным флагом.
This is a false flag operation.
Я говорил, что вы
I
плохо
say
нас
that
слушали.
we didn't
В
listen
частности,
to us
Соединенные
properly,
Штаты.
particularly the US.
Мы не говорили, как
We
сказал
didn't
представитель
say,
Соединенных
as the
Штатов,
representative of the US
что у
claimed,
Украины,
that
у самой Украины есть
Ukraine itself
военно-биологическая
has
программа.
a military biological program.
Такая программа, говорили
This
мы, на основании
program,
полученных
we said,
документов,
based on the documents
есть
that
у
we
самих
have,
Соединенных Штатов.
is something that the US itself has, not Ukraine.
А Украина
And Ukraine,
в этом
in
использовалась
this
темным.
case, is being kept in the dark.
Мы же приводили вам
And we
факты
already provided you with facts,
о
talked you through them,
росте,
about
о
the
загадочном
spike
росте на Украине
in Ukraine
опасных
of
заболеваний,
dangerous lethal diseases,
которые не объясняются
which there's no explanation
простым,
for them through
простыми факторами.
not usual
вполне
factors.
могут
They
быть
can't explain
связаны
that. It
с
could be
такого рода
linked
деятельностью.
to this kind of activity, though.
Сегодня опять мы слышали
Today,
аргументы о
again, we
том,
heard the argument
что самым весомым
that the
аргументом
biggest
доказательством
argument
того,
of
что
proof
на
that
Украине не
in
осуществлялась
Ukraine there were
военно-биологическая деятельность,
biological
это мнение
activities been taking
секретаря
place
ООН.
is the view and the
Я уже говорил,
this
что
was the
ООН
UN Secretariat
не
view, but I
может
already
знать
said that
об
the
этом.
UN can't
О
know about
секретных
this.
военно-биологических
Secret
программах, те,
military
кто их
biological
проводит,
programs and those
не
who carry
делятся
them
ни с
out
ООН,
are not
ни с
shared
кем-либо
with the
другим.
UN or with anybody else.
Как я уже
And as
сказал,
I already said, and I said
мы эту тему
before,
не
we
снимем с повестки дня.
put this
Новые
item on
факты
the agenda.
появляются, и мы
New
будем
facts have
информировать Совет
appeared, and we will
Безопасности
keep
и
the Security
международное
Council
сообщество
abreast, as well as the international
об
community,
этих фактах,
about these
которые
facts,
наверняка будут
which
раскрываться в ближайшее время.
will
Благодарю вас.
be, I'm sure, revealed in the near future. Thank you very much.
أشكر ممثل الاتحاد الروسي
I
على
thank the
بيانه.
representative of the Russian Federation
لم
for his
يعد هناك
statement.
أسماء
There are
مدرجة
no
على
more
قائمة
names inscribed on the
المتحدثين.
list of speakers.
رفعت
The
الجلسة.
meeting is adjourned.
that live so that the cameraman can, yeah.
Hello. Our partners are in complete denial. They won't listen to what we're saying. They won't accept that we are presenting facts and not just propaganda. We circulated new materials about the issue among the Security Council members and the General Assembly. And I'm sure that you will be able to get access to those documents. They are not confidential or secret, and you will make your own mind whether it's propaganda and unsubstantiated accusations, or whether these are documents that are worth commenting and replying, which we didn't hear today. Today we heard the repetition of what they said, of what our partners said in the meeting of the 11th of March. They refused to accept and to recognize that we presented new set of evidence of military biological programs that were conducted in Ukraine with the participation of Pentagon. And now I would like to give the floor to my first deputy to make a special announcement.
Yes. Hello, everybody. I just wanted to announce that my Twitter was blocked today, and I received a message from the client service saying that I am violating the rules of Twitter and I am engaged in abuse and harassment. So the tweet is like this. That's how fake news is born. We warned in our statement back on 7 March that the hospital in Mariupol has been turned into a military object by radicals. Very disturbing that UN spreads this information without verification. That was my tweet. So it's abuse and harassment according to Twitter. I will open an account in Telegram, and you will receive English version link to this account. This is very deplorable, and this clearly illustrates how much alternative view and free press and free information is valued by Twitter and in this country. Thank you very much.
This is a new interpretation of the word harassment as well.
Thank you.
Taken over? Not right? Gotcha.
Good afternoon. No, it's still morning. Long session. So we've just had a council meeting where the Russians made the same allegations that they made last week. The UN was clear that there was no evidence. It was nonsense then. It's nonsense now. And as far as we're concerned, frankly, this is the disinformation of the desperate. Things are clearly not going well for Russia in Ukraine. The consequences, the humanitarian consequences are terrible. And we heard too about the wider economic consequences, for the global economy as food prices rise, and concerns about the integrity of international borders as well. And you all saw that Russia withdrew their humanitarian resolution yesterday. There was no one who was going to support Russia's invasion of Ukraine, because that's what that resolution was about. So I think we see Russia now as isolated, desperate, and we are looking forward to a more balanced discussion in the General Assembly, where I think people truly understand the humanitarian consequences of this invasion.
Ambassador, do you feel that China is slowly shifting away from Russia in the Council?
So I think President Xi Jinping and President Biden have just had a 2-hour conversation. I haven't had a chance to catch up on that. I think China remains, as they've said all along, very keen for the invasion to end, for there to be dialogue. They obviously have a lot of hopes pinned on the 4 rounds of dialogue so far, concerned about the humanitarian consequences. I'm not seeing a big shift, but China was very clear today as well that they adhere to the Chemical and Biological Weapons Convention, and of course they experienced chemical weapons attacks themselves. So I think it's important when you look at that, countries that have experienced chemical weapons attacks, or as we in the UK have, we've seen them on our streets. I think we find it particularly egregious when others come with spurious claims about these very serious sorts of issues.
Ambassador, what do you think about Russia using Security Council on this matter?
Frankly, I think this is a perversion of the Security Council's purpose. First of all, there is no evidence. We heard that. Second of all, we discussed Ukraine yesterday. We talked about the war, its humanitarian impacts, its regional impacts, its international impacts. There are other items on the Security Council agenda. You know them well. Syria, Yemen, Myanmar, Afghanistan. These are issues that need our attention. We do not need to be spending our time on disinformation on a war that Russia has started.
Does the UK have any intelligence that Russia is planning a chemical attack?
We've, in unprecedented moves, have publicized a lot of the intelligence we have, and as have the Americans. We do remain concerned that there could be a false flag attack, and that a false flag attack could involve chemical and biological weapons. That remains a concern, but we haven't got published intelligence on that. Yeah.
Ambassador, what's your expectation for the humanitarian resolution in the General Assembly?
So my hope for the humanitarian resolution in the General Assembly is that we will see even stronger support than we saw for the resolution that condemned Russia's invasion. So we had 141 countries in support of that. I think as the humanitarian consequences of Russia's invasion have become clearer, not just the immediate humanitarian consequences for Ukraine, but the wider humanitarian consequences. Bread prices are going up, fuel prices are going up, commodity prices are going up. Countries whose citizens have already been hit by COVID, by climate change, now they're taking another economic and social hit because of Russia's war. So I think we will see a lot of countries concerned about this. And also, humanitarian aid now is thinly spread. There are a lot of demands between Ukraine, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, Myanmar, conflict after conflict. So we could end this war and take away this humanitarian crisis.
When are you expecting a vote on the GA resolution?
I think it'll be really important for us to consult the whole membership on the GA resolution to understand how people are approaching this question. We've got 3 weeks into the war, 3 million refugees. We want to understand how people see it. But I think we need to move fast. The humanitarian situation is deteriorating fast. So I hope we'll move sometime next week. Thank you.
The representative said there's no evidence of a biological
weapons program in Ukraine, but she also said that there's no capacity for them to investigate this. They don't have the capacity. Does that undermine the West argument when they say there's no evidence and point to the UN?
No, I don't think it does, because the point is that the CBW is the organization that needs to investigate those claims. So, you know, if there is a genuine concern, the right thing to do would be to seal off the site, have a ceasefire, seal off the site, and then allow experts in to investigate. It is not the right thing to do to bring spurious claims to the UN Security Council, which are debunked by everyone there. No, thank you.
Describe the dossier the Russians sent you. Could you describe what was in it, what these alleged documents are? I mean, what does it look like?
To be honest, you know, it's 69 pages long, and it does not deserve the time to read it. It's disinformation of the desperate. That's how I would describe it, to be honest. Yeah.
Ukrainian refugees that they are balking in Calais in France trying to get to the UK. Is there any new programs offered, new visas offered for these refugees that they have? Also, a lot of them have family members residing in the UK.
So we have accelerated our refugee acceptance program in the UK. So now, if you are the immediate family member of a Ukrainian in the UK, you don't need to give biometrics. And that was one of the issues originally, because there was no place to give biometrics in Calais. They had to go to Paris or Brussels. So that's a much smoother process. We've got a process too whereby British families can host Ukrainian refugees. And I think we've already got about 11,000 families signed up to that in the first day. We're making provision for Ukrainian children to join schools so that they can come in as smoothly as possible. But we're also very mindful too that refugees can often be dispersed around, and then they become vulnerable to criminals and traffickers. So we want to make sure that we put in place protection for the refugees. That was something that came up in our discussions during the Commission on the Status of Women earlier this week, and I think it's a very important point too. Right, thank you all very much. Have a good weekend. Thank you.